Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you don't know who I am, I'm David Hislop and I play guitar for Bethel Music. In today's video, we are going to do a rundown of my pedal board. First, we are going to do an overview of the board and its features, and then we will walk through the signal chain and listen to all the pedals one by one and see how I have them set up. For this video, I'm going to be playing my Veritas Custom Portlander. And if you don't know these guitars, you need to look them up because they absolutely rule. I'll be running stereo through one of my British AC30s with greenbacks and a Fender Pro Sonic, both which are ISO'd in the other room and mic'd up with Shure 545s like I use live. And one more thing before we dive in, if you aren't subscribed, go ahead and hit subscribe so you stay up to date with all the new content from me. And also check out my store. In the description, I have downloads available for all of my Bethel Music Strymon presets, as well as impulse responses you can use in the Helix and Iridium and Kemper, and also my Kemper profiles of both of my British AC30s and Fender Pro Sonic, which also include my pedalboard drives baked into some of the profiles, so go check those out after this video. All right, so let's talk about the board. This board I've had for about a year. It was built for me in January of 2019. I toured with it all this year. I've flown with it about 100,000 miles and it's just held up beautifully. It was built by my friend David Paleo, who now works for Goodwood Audio and builds all of their pedal boards that are assembled in the USA. So the board itself is a 30 by 18 trailer trash board, and it's the angled version. And I absolutely love Trailer Trash's angled boards. I've used them since 2012. I had the 28 by 16 before this one, and there's something about them that's just so comfortable with a slight incline. Pedals are easily accessible, and I love the fact that you can mount all your power supplies and cabling underneath the board. It just makes for a really clean looking build. So taking a look at my inputs and outputs, I have these Nutric jacks for all of my XLR and 1/4 inch outputs and inputs. I have a mono input on the front of my board, and then sends at the end of my chain. I have 1/4 inch, so if I want to use that straight into an amp, or XLRs, which come out of the TA links mounted below. And on the left side of my board, I have mono send and return jacks, so I can audition pedals, or a lot of times I use it with my Memory Man in the studio, so I can just expand my board if I want to, or try out an effect, so it's super handy. And I also have an auxiliary power outlet that I'll use for whatever I'm auditioning in that loop. Or I will use it to run this pedalboard light if we are on a dark stage. As far as cabling goes, I'm using all Mogami 2319 cable and Switchcraft plugs. So taking a look underneath the board, as you can see, it's just wired beautifully, so props to David Paleo. It features a Goodwood Audio underfacer, which is my main hub for all of my audio coming into my board and going out. It has features like a mute switch, a sum to mono switch for your stereo signals, a phase reverse so you can make sure your amps are in phase while you're playing, because different amps have different phase depending on how the speakers are wired up. So sometimes if you're running stereo, your amps can actually be out of phase with each other while you're plugged into them. So that's a great feature to have. And it also has a ground lift. Next to that is the TA link, and that is the box that allows me to send my XLR signal up to 300 or so feet to my amps, similar to an SGI, except this takes 9-volt power and is a lot lighter, so it's very pedalboard friendly. And then my board is powered by all Strymon, as you see, the Zuma and 2 Ohas, whatever they are, they're awesome. Each outlet has about 500 milliamps, I think, of current, so it can power like anything you'll need it to power. They're great, they're small, they're lightweight, and yeah, they rule. So that is the underside of the board. So let's talk about my looper and MIDI switcher. The MIDI switcher is made by Disaster Area. It's a DMC4. This one I've had for about 4 years, I think, so there's probably newer models. But my MIDI switching is pretty simple. I just have it tied into the Strymon timeline in Big Sky, and these buttons bank up and down on both. And then these buttons select presets A and B on both pedals. So the way I save my songs, I pick a bank. Some songs have 2 banks, some only need 1 patch of delay and reverb. So just depending on the song, like here's Raise a Hallelujah, it's in this bank. If I hit B, Goodness of God in this bank, say we wanted to play King of My Heart, I'll go up to this bank, and there's the first set of presets, and here are the second set of presets for that song. Some of my songs I have an extra reverb, or in other cases I just have a default setting that I might use in spontaneous moments or what have you. So pretty simple as far as my MIDI setup goes, but it's effective. I can get to any songs I need to on the fly. I mean, there's up to 200. Well, with the timeline you have 200 presets. Big Sky you have 300 because of the third bank. So I have songs from tons of albums saved, so if we're spontaneously pulling up a song, I can just go find that setting and pull it up. So let's talk about the looper. This is made by a company called Build Your Own Clone, and they have a website where they sell tons of pedal kits that you can buy and assemble and build yourself. So they're just copies or clones of a lot of famous circuits out there. So it's a lot of fun if you're into that sort of thing. But they came out with this looper 5 or 6 years ago, maybe 7 now, I don't know. But it's programmable, all mono loops, no MIDI, so it's fairly simple. But what I loved about it is it was a pretty small package. It's the size of a traditional 5-button true bypass looper, but it has 8 loops in it, and it's programmable. It also features a buffered input as well as an unbuffered input. It has 2 modes in it, a loop mode and a preset mode. So I'll go to the loop mode real quick, and in this loop mode, it works as a regular true bypass looper. So the red LEDs show you which loops are engaged. So like I said, you have up to 8, and the way you access them is by hitting 2 buttons down. And that's 1, this is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. So if you're looking for a simple looper, that packs a lot of punch into a pretty small format. And then in the preset mode, you get back to that by hitting down all of these toggles at the same time. Now you see we're in preset mode. The green LED indicates which preset we have saved. It has 4 different pages, A, B, C, and D, of 8 presets each for a total of 32 presets. The way you access these banks is to hit down all of these 3 buttons at the same time. See, we're in B, C, this is D, and back to A. And the way I use this preset mode is to save different combinations of drives or octave pedals, anything that's a mono pedal that I have in the looper, and we will go through it and I'll show you exactly how I have it laid out. For example, in this preset I just have 1 loop on, but in other presets I might have a couple of loops stacking different pedals in those loops. So it's pretty cool. Alright, now let's take a walk through my signal chain and listen to some pedals. So my guitar comes into the side of my board here through this Nutric 1/4-inch input jack, and that is wired to the input of my underfacer. And out of the underfacer by Goodwood, there is a tuner output which goes to this strobe tuner, which rules, and it stays on all the time, so I can always tune or see how my tuning is holding up even when I'm playing. It does a great job tracking, and yeah, super bright display so I can see it on sunny stages, and it has a small footprint, so highly recommended. And then out of the other output of the underfacer is where my signal chain starts for the rest of my pedals. First pedal I go into is my Barber tone press compressor, and I've had this compressor for about a year, been super happy with it. I had the Walrus Deep 6 before this, and both are amazing compressors. This one features similar parameters: volume, blend, sustain. It has an attack control here, so right now it's in a classic setting. If you flip it to the left, it's a faster attack. And this toggle right here is a little brightness toggle, and it just adds a little bump in the top end of your signal, but right now I have it flat. So I'll show you how it sounds bypassed. Here is my guitar. And with it on. Okay, let me do it again so you can hear more of the dynamics with picking. With it on. So you can hear it really decreases my dynamic range, which in turn creates more sustain and makes everything really punchy. And it kind of tames a lot of the transients that you might get from plucking single strings, especially high notes, a lot of times without the compression. If you're picking up high, you can have notes that really jump out, whereas this will create more sustain and a little more body to it. So let's check it out now with some reverb and delay. Really happy with that compressor. I recommend you check it out. All right, so moving on, the next thing in my chain is this volume pedal, and this is the Hilton Pro Guitar volume pedal. And I've had this 2 or 3 years, and I really love it. Super comfortable sweep on it, and the size is great. And the biggest thing I love about it is there's no components inside that are wearable. So there's no potentiometer, and there is no string, things that can break. I'm sure a lot of us have a shelf full of Ernie Ball VP Juniors out there that have just either the strings broken or the pots have gone bad and scratchy. But with this, it actually uses an infrared technology somehow, I don't really know. So there's no parts inside that will wear over time, and I haven't had any issues with it. It sounds great, so definitely check that out. Out of my volume pedal, I am running Into the True Bypass Looper. In loop 1, I have the Electroharmonics Pitchfork, which is controlled by this AMT expression pedal. Now you might be wondering why I have a Pog and a Pitchfork, and the reason is I don't use this like I would use the Pog. This is set up to be used like a whammy. It's just in a smaller format that can actually fit on my board and doesn't weigh 1,000,000 pounds. So most of the time I have it set in a octave up setting, with the blend about 75%, so I will show you how that sounds right here. Selecting loop 1. So there you have it. It's a whammy. Ways I use this is sometimes ambient, or I might use it in more of a lead line type way. So let's turn on my Kilt and the drive. So pretty fun. One thing I wish this pedal did have is a filter knob on it like the Pog 2. That's the main reason I love this pedal, is because it has this filter on it where you can really tame all the high-end frequencies. So this one, most of the time I'm running it at a 75% blend, because if you run it at 100%, you get that kind of digitally really shrill and bright sound, which is I'm not a fan of. But when it's blended with your dry signal, it's a little less noticeable once you start stacking stuff. So Electroharmonics, if you're watching, put a filter knob on this thing. All right, moving on. In loop 2, I have the Pog 2, and I love this pedal. For what I was mentioning about the Pitchfork, is it has this filter knob on it. Obviously the presets are awesome and all the different parameters, but this filter makes it so much more usable to me. I've had this pedal on my board, I realized the other week, for a whole decade. I got it in 2010, and it's the only pedal that has stayed on my board for about 10 years, and that's kind of crazy to think about. Anyways, a lot of ways I use this pedal. This setting I'm about to show you is probably my most used setting, and it's just a simple slight octave up with the filter rolled down a little bit. So it's not a super obvious Pog setting. It more so just reinforces any lead lines I might play or beefs up my tone a little bit. So dry sounds like this, and with the Pog on, again. So you hear it's very subtle. If there was no filter, it would sound like that. And that's one of the reasons why I don't love some of the smaller versions of the Pog. That sound is cool if you're going for that, but if you want it to be a little more subtle and not have that sharp digital edge to it, having the filter is a great way to just make it blend in with your dry signal a bit more. So I'll show you an example now with some reverb, delay, and drive. So here is no Pog, just overdrive. And here is the Pog with the same settings. No Pog. Pog. So you hear it's very subtle, but it definitely kind of makes the lead line stick out a little more and punch a little more. It sounds a little bit bigger. So that's probably my most used setting. Some of the other settings I use, I'll just scroll through the banks real quick. So a little more of that obvious upper octave. Those two are mostly octave up and no dry signal, so you can do some cool ambient textures with it. You know, make it sound all dreamy. And then moving on, there's a setting with a little bit of octave down. And a little more the same. And then an organ setting, which I hardly use at all, but it's in here if you want to do some other ambient stuff. That is pretty cool sounding now that I hear it again. It's been a while. Like I said, I've had this pedal 10 years, so I've kind of gone through a lot of sounds I've used, and then I'll change the way I use it. So a lot of the settings I've had over time aren't even in here anymore. So that's kind of how it's set up right now. Great pedal. Check it out. All right, moving on to bank 3. This is my first overdrive I have, and that is the Guerrier Amps Lightspeed. This is an awesome sounding pedal. I primarily use it with single coil guitars. It has a little bit of a smoother drive to it than the Kilt does, and Kilt is kind of my primary drive, especially with humbuckers, but I found that the Lightspeed really helps to kind of even out the single coil guitars I use, like my Strat or my baritone, and offers a little bit more of a warmer drive than the Kilt. So here's a little example. Clean tone and Lightspeed. Clean. Lightspeed. So it's very subtle. It's a very light overdrive right now, and you can hear it sounds a little darker with my humbuckers, but like I said, I really love it with the single coils. I don't really use it at all when I'm playing a humbucker guitar. Moving on to bank 4, I have the JHS Kilt, which, by the way, Stoogie and Josh Scott, if you were watching this, great job on this pedal. I freaking love it. As a matter of fact, I have 2 on my board, and I will explain why in a minute. But this pedal, the version 1, is probably my most used drive pedal. I would say it covers 85% of all my drive tones during a set is just this pedal. And the way I'm running it is the gain toggles both down, no low cut, and then the boost is set up post drive. So the volume boost that I'm adding isn't hitting the circuit more and distorting, it's actually increasing volume and punching into the amps harder to make them distort a little bit more. And that's a lot of how I get my dirty tone. And that works great if you have amps that sound really good when they break up. If I'm playing an amp that sounds awful when it breaks up, then a lot of times I might flip this down so where I'm not relying on some of the amp gain and overdrive from it breaking up, but more so just pushing into the circuit a little bit harder. But if you have amps that sound awesome when they break up, that's the way I run this. And it kind of does a magic of, you know, the amp is saturating the delay and reverb a little bit, so you kind of get this perfect storm of your effects. So I'll show you some sound examples. Clean tone, and then kilt. And as you hear, it's a super touch sensitive drive, which is why I love it. This is actually my first stage setting, so normally when I'm kicking on a drive from my clean tone, it's usually this sound right here. And I love this pedal because it kind of gives you what you put into it. If you really dig in, it will kind of drive a little bit more, and if you back off, it cleans up a bit more too. So I'm really into it. Here's with some delay and reverb. So that tone is my stage 1 overdrive sound. So what I do with the boost is that's my bigger sections or lead tone. So moving into the boost sounds something like this. And now hearing it with some lead lines. Listening to it now with some different reverb. So that is Kilt version 1. Absolutely love that pedal, and like I said, it covers most of my drive tones. For this build, I had a little bit of extra space, and I also had the Kilt version 2, so I've always loved the higher gain settings you can get on this pedal, especially the fuzz, but I also really love the way I just showed you how I use it. So with being able to fit version 2 on my board, I can now have those fuzz tones. The differences between them, version 2 is obviously smaller, and it has the red remote option, which toggles the G2 gain control. So with this, I can essentially have 2 more gain stages in this kilt. Tonal wise, they're very, very close. I noticed that this tamed the top end a little bit to my ear. This one sounds slightly more open in the top end. So I actually like this one a little bit better for the way I'm using it, a little bit lighter gain. But in higher gain settings, I find it can get a little harsh, whereas this one and whatever they did with it, it seems like it tames it a little bit. I could be completely wrong, but that's just what my ears hear. So the V2 Kilt is in loop 5, and I will show you what it sounds like. Compared with V1 with the boost on. One thing I did with this board is my approach to my overdrive tones was, instead of having tons of different color as far as drives go, I kind of wanted to keep it similar EQ-wise, but just progress in gain and fuzz. And while the color does change a little bit, it is very similar, obviously. So when I hit on a pedal, it still feels like the tone I was used to. So I mainly use Kilt V1 most of the time. Like I said, it covers 80-85% of my drive tones. I occasionally use V2 when I'm doing more rhythm type stuff. So like big single note rhythm, something like this. Versus V1. V1 still sounds awesome, but in some cases I might just want a little bit more of that aggressiveness on it. And that is on not the heaviest fuzz setting, that is with the G2 toggle up, so it's the second to last heaviest setting on the Kilt. With both toggles up, you get the fuzz setting, which sounds super, super cool as well. So super cool, really splattery, gated fuzz. Moving on to loop 6, I have a fun, crazy pedal, as if you thought the Kilts were crazy enough. This is made by Gamechanger Audio, and that is the Plasma pedal. It is a distortion unit and fuzz / electricity powerhouse. Somehow it converts your signal into electricity, and it does this really cool fuse thing that responds to your signal. You can see as I'm playing. And that is actually part of the audio signal, believe it or not. It's not just a gimmick. You'll have to look up videos about that pedal because it's just super crazy. But things I love about it, it has a really unique sound and it has a blend knob, so I can run it in parallel with any other drives. The way I actually have this preset saved, if you look at my looper, I have loop 6 on, which is the Plasma pedal, and before it I'm running my Kilt version 2. So I'm getting the fuzz from this Kilt and then running the Plasma as well with the blend about 70% up or so. So I'm getting the color of this while we're still retaining a little bit of the mid-range and the vibe of the Kilt that you've heard throughout my gain staging. So a lot of times I run this with my compressor off because it kind of opens up the fuzz a little bit more. So here is what it sounds like. And here's just the Kilt. Plasma and Kilt. So super wild pedal. I'll turn off the Kilt just so you can hear the Plasma by itself, crank up the blend to 100. And the voltage control on this acts as your gain basically, so you can see. You'll notice that tube is getting brighter. And another thing I love about this pedal is the gate inside it is super quick and super tight, so you're not getting a lot of bleed and noise cutting through your signal. It's very, very tight. And the EQ is very effective as well. You can get, you know, that darker kind of mid-rangey tone. But my favorite way to run it is, like I showed you, parallel with the Kilt. So Gamechanger Audio Plasma pedal, go check it out. And that's it for my drive section. Moving on to loop 7, that is an empty loop. So I just have it saved as a preset including Loop 4, which is my JHS Kilt V1, and my Pitchfork in the whammy setting. So if I just want my regular, overdrive, that's in this loop, but if I want to add the Pitchfork for whammy stuff, it's right here with drive. If I want the Pitchfork clean, boom, it's in that loop by itself. But with drive, I showed you it earlier, it just sounds a little bit like this. Almost knocked over my board there, but there you have it, fun pedal. In loop 8 is where I have the send and return jacks on the side of my board, so I can run my Memory Man in the studio or Audition drives or whatever pedal I want. So that's in loop 8 if I ever want it. My preset that I have saved is my V1 Kilt with the Pog 2. So similar to preset 7 where I have it saved with the Pitchfork for whammy stuff. If I want to add the Pog with drive instead of clean, then I'll hit this and it runs this Kilt and my Pog for lead lines. If I want the Pog clean, I'll just go back to this bank where I just have the Pog with my clean tone. All right, moving on from the looper, the next pedal I go into is this JHS Emperor V2 chorus and vibrato, and it is a super awesome pedal, sounds amazing. This is where my stereo signal starts, so I'm coming in mono and then sending out stereo via a TRS cable. So I use a lot of different settings in this pedal. I mainly like to tinker with it in the studio. Live, I mostly have it on a vibrato setting. The Mobius has vibrato settings as well, and when I'm in an arrangement of a song, a lot of times I'm using my preset in the Mobius for that song. But if we go into anything spontaneous or I'm not on that patch, I will use the Emperor a lot, and it sounds amazing. So let's take a listen. Let's hear it with some delay and reverb. It's a super cool, good sounding pedal. Here's a little demo of the chorus setting. The different wave shapes on it. It has a sine wave, a triangle wave, and a square wave. So super fun pedal. So out of the Emperor, I'm sending into the Red Panda Particle, and this pedal is crazy. It is a delay, pitch shifter, ring mod sound machine. It is crazy. You should go on YouTube and watch the video about this thing. It's like an hour long or something, and I still don't fully understand it. It just does a lot of crazy sounds, some of them not musical at all, but really cool soundscapes, and then some of them very cool and musical. It has 4 presets, and I'll show you some of the presets I have saved and how I use it. It's more so just cool textures I might add on something. So this is, it's a glitchy shimmer type thing. So I might use it, if I'm doing some cool swells. And then some other presets I have saved. More of the same. So this one's more of a reverse delay, so I might throw it on top of a patch I already have pulled up. Or again, for more ambient type stuff. And then in position 4, just kind of a slice, choppy, glitchy delay. So super fun, crazy pedal. Some of the other sounds, let me see if I can just pull up something super crazy. Anyways, it gets super wild, so not super musical in all its settings, but does crazy things. So out of the particle, I am sending out stereo into the Strymon L cap, and this has got to be one of my favorite delays. It's a digital tape delay, but the modulation on it, the wow and the flutter, is just so lush, and even compared to the tape setting in the timeline, which I use all the time, it doesn't touch the L cap for whatever reason. I don't know what's different about the circuit, but it sounds amazing. I kind of have this on my board as an auxiliary delay. I might throw it on top of a preset that I have going on here whenever I'm in a song arrangement, and I just need something extra for swells if we're doing something spontaneous, but I want to still stay in my song settings with the timeline. So here is kind of how I have it set at the moment. So as you hear, it's super lush and just has a lot of vibe to it. I adjust the parameters on it quite often too, just depending on what I need. I like to do the whole oscillating delay thing with it. Let me show you what I mean. How I use it most of the time live is stacking it on presets that I might already have going on the timeline in Big Sky when I'm in the arrangement of a song, or after when I need just a little bit more delay and reverb for swells or anything ambient. Let me show you what I mean. So here is the Raise a Hallelujah, Big Sky, and timeline patches that I've been using. So I can swell with those. And the swelling sounds okay, but if I want a little bit more modulation and texture, I might kick on the L cap on top of those. All right, so moving on from the L cap, I go into the Strifecta, as you see here, starting with the Mobius, then the Timeline, and the Big Sky. And these pedals really need no explanation or introduction. They are phenomenal, and they have so many sounds packed into them that you can search and find. Also, as I mentioned earlier in this video, all of my presets for all 3 pedals are available on my website for all of the Bethel music songs we play. So diving into the Mobius, I use a lot of different patches on this pedal, pretty much almost every patch. I'll show you an example here. This is a patch I use for Reckless Love Verse, and here I have my Raise a Hallelujah stuff still on, but it's the Destroyer setting, which has a cool kind of vibrato vibe to it. By itself sounds something like this. And let's see what I have in this. I have a chorus for You Deserve It All. So those are just a couple of sounds I use in the pedal. Also, this little 2-button switcher right here is a little expression controller I built to bank up and down on the Mobius. It's not tied into the MIDI setup of the Timeline and Big Sky with the DMC4, and that is just because I don't use the Mobius on every song, so I like to operate it independently, so I can bank up and down with this guy right here. Out of the Mobius, I go into the Timeline, and then out of the Timeline, I go into the Big Sky. And out of the Big Sky, my signal goes back under the board into the Goodwood underfacer. And out of the underfacer, my signal is sent to these 1/4-inch stereo jacks if I'm going to use 1/4 inches to plug straight into an amp. If I'm, playing right in front of my amps. And then I have another set of outputs going out of the underfacer into the TA link, which converts my signal from an unbalanced to a balanced signal and is sent to these XLR jacks on the side of my board, so I can run my signal up to 300 feet without any signal loss. Technically, if you're only using a 1/4 inch that's unbalanced, you will start to get some high-end signal loss after 25 or 30 feet, I think it is. So that's why if you're running amps far away off stage and isolating them like we do a lot, you really want a set of SGIs or TA links or whatever's on the market that would convert your unbalanced signal into a balanced signal so you can run it that far without any signal loss. And that's about all as far as my board goes. Let's take a look at the case. So here is my pedal board in its case. This case was custom built for me by Creation Music Company. Fully loaded with all the accessories underneath the board. It weighs about 65 pounds, which is pretty heavy, but I had it built with some wheels and a collapsible handle, so that makes it much easier when you're carrying it through an airport. One solid tip of advice I can give when ordering a custom case is you want to make sure that the foam that is in the top lid is pretty evenly touching all of your pedals, so that way when it's flipped upside down, all of your pedals are bearing the weight of the pedal board and not just one, because that is how you'll get some broken knobs on your pedals. So when I had this case made, I had a little riser put in at the bottom of the pedal board since it is an angled board, so that way when it's in the case, it's sitting flat. So here is what underneath the pedal board looks like. As you see, there's plenty of storage room for my cables, my TA link receivers that go to the amps, my light, any accessories I need for my pedal board. I love this case. It's been super reliable. Like I said, I've flown with it about 100,000 miles so far, and it's protected all of my gear perfectly. So if you need a great case or a pedal board or accessories, check out Creation Music Company. Thanks guys for watching. I hope that was insightful. Please leave a comment below and let me know if you have any questions, and I will try to answer all of them. Also, don't forget to subscribe if you're not already, and check out my website where you can find more info about the gear I use, all of my Strymon presets, Kemper profiles, impulse responses, as well as Helix patches coming soon, so stay tuned for those. Till next time.